I joked, "She's my wife," and she blushed and whispered, "I wish that were true." "Who's the lucky lady?" the bartender shouted over the thumping bass of the club, eyeing Eleonora as she leaned against me, her laughter bright and spilling over the rim of her margarita. I grinned, the tequila loosening my tongue, throwing an arm around her shoulders. "Her? She's my wife." The bartender laughed, wiping the counter. I expected Eleonora to shove me to make a quick retort about my ridiculousness. Instead, she stilled. A soft, crimson blush crept up her neck, painting her cheeks. She leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered a secret meant only for me. I wish that were true. Dario Jan had always considered his friendship with Eleonora Brun an immovable object, an anchor in the chaotic sea of their 20s. They had met during their tumultuous undergraduate years. He, a struggling architecture student surviving on black coffee and stubborn ambition. She, an art history major with a penchant for chaotic sweaters and an alarming caffeine dependency. They were two broken jigsaw pieces that had somehow fit perfectly together. Now, at 28, Dario was a junior partner at a mid-sized firm, while Eleonora curated exhibitions at a boutique gallery. They navigated the labyrinth of adult life side by side, sharing late-night pizza runs, complaining about their respective bosses, and analysing each other's disastrous dates with clinical precision. It was a Friday evening, and they were sprawled on the worn leather sofa in Dario's apartment, a graveyard of takeout boxes littering the coffee table. The air was thick with the comfortable silence that only true friends share. "My mother called again," Eleonora sighed, her voice muffled by the throw pillow she was clutching. Dario glanced up from the blueprints he was reviewing. The bi-weekly interrogation. Did Ingetraud survive the Spanish Inquisition?" Eleonora groaned. "Barely. It's always the same. Eleonora, when are you going to settle down? Eleonora, your biological clock is ticking loud enough to wake the dead. Eleonora, look at Elsa MacDonald. She's on her second child, and you're still curating dust." Dario winced. Ingetraud Stan, Eleonora's mother, was a formidable woman whose primary goal in life seemed to be marrying off her daughter before she hit 30. Elsa MacDonald, their former high school classmate, was Ingetraud's favourite weapon, the golden standard of suburban bliss. "She's relentless," Eleonora continued, sitting up and running a hand through her dishevelled blonde hair. I told her I was focusing on the new exhibition, the one featuring Helga Kraus's brutalist sculptures. Do you think she cared? No. She asked if Helgi was single. Dario chuckled, though he felt a pang of sympathy. "Helgi is 70, Eleonora, and practically married to his welding torch." "Exactly!" She threw the pillow at him. "She doesn't care. She just wants me to show up to the family reunion next month with a ring on my finger. If I go alone again, I swear she'll try to set me up with Eustatio Cardoso." Dario's eyes widened. "Eustatio? The guy who collects taxidermy raccoons?" "The very same. Apparently he's a very successful accountant now. A stable catchum, according to Mother." Eleonora shuddered visibly. "I can't do it, Dario. I can't sit through another dinner fielding questions about my empty womb while Elsa humble brags about her toddler's milestones." An idea, reckless and unformed, began to germinate in Dario's mind. It was a stupid idea, the kind born of exhaustion and a desperate desire to protect his best friend. But the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like the perfect solution. "What if you didn't have to go alone?" he suggested, his voice carefully neutral. Eleonora eyed him suspiciously. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about me, coming with you." "To the reunion?" She laughed nervously. "Dario, it's a family thing. You're not family." "I could be." The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unsaid things. Eleonora stared at him, her blue eyes wide, searching for the punchline. Are you proposing to me?" she whispered, the words trembling on her lips. "What? No, God, no." Dario scrubbed a hand over his face, suddenly feeling very warm. "I mean, yes, in a way. A fake proposal." Eleonora blinked, processing the information. "A fake proposal? Hear me out," he said, leaning forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "We pretend we're engaged, just for the weekend. It shuts your mother up, saves you from the raccoon enthusiast, and gives Elsa something else to talk about besides little Timmy's potty training." Eleonora was staring at him as if he'd sprouted a second head. "Dario, that's insane. It's a terrible idea. We'll never pull it off." "Why not?" He was warming up to the idea now. We know everything about each other. We're practically an old married couple anyway. We know our favourite foods, our irritating habits, our darkest secrets. It's perfect. It's a lie, Dario. A massive, convoluted lie. It's a temporary solution to a permanent annoyance, he countered. Think about it, Elle. A whole weekend without Ingertraud's nagging. Total peace. And when it's over, we break up amicably. Tragic but unavoidable. We remain best friends and your mother backs off, giving you time to heal. Eleonora bit her lip, a habit she had when she was deep in thought. He could see the wheels turning in her head, weighing the pros and cons. The sheer audacity of the plan appealed to the rebellious streak she usually kept hidden beneath her curated professional exterior. It would be quite the performance, she mused, a slow, mischievous smile spreading across her face. We'd need a backstory, Dario added, eager to seal the deal. A romantic awakening, an aha moment where we suddenly realized we were madly in love. Oh God, we'd have to act coupley, holding hands, gazing adoringly into each other's eyes. She mimed, gagging, but the smile remained. A small price to pay for salvation, Dario declared grandly. They spent the next hour hashing out the details, constructing a narrative so intricate and convincing it could rival a Shakespearean comedy. They decided their moment occurred a few weeks prior after a particularly grueling installation at the gallery. They had shared a bottle of cheap wine on her fire escape, the city lights glittering below, and suddenly everything shifted. It was cliché, perhaps, but effective. By the time they finished the pizza, the pact was sealed. Dario John and Eleonora Brun were officially, entirely falsely engaged. As Dario walked back to his own apartment that night, the crisp autumn air cooling his flushed face, he felt a strange flutter in his chest. It was just a performance, he reminded himself, a favour for a friend. But as he recalled the way her eyes had sparkled when she agreed, the warmth of her laughter, a small, treacherous thought whispered in the back of his mind. What if it wasn't entirely a joke? The following weeks were a masterclass in deception. Dario and Eleonora threw themselves into their roles with a terrifying level of commitment. They needed to make the transition from platonic best friends to deeply devoted lovers seem natural, which required practice. They started small, casual touches, a hand lingering on an arm, a knee brushing under the table. It felt awkward at first, a clumsy choreography they had to learn. They would catch themselves overthinking every movement, turning what should have been an instinctual gesture into a mechanical action. "You're gripping my hand like it's a lifeline, Dario," Eleonora muttered one afternoon as they walked through the park, supposedly practicing their public displays of affection. Dario loosened his grip immediately, his cheeks burning. "Sorry, I'm just trying to look protective. You look like you're trying to amputate my fingers." She sighed, stopping and turning to face him. "Look, we need to relax. If we're this tense around each other, my mother will smell the lie from a mile away." "Right. Relax." He took a deep breath, trying to dispel the nervous energy buzzing beneath his skin. "Okay, let's try again." He reached out, his hand tentatively wrapping around hers. This time he focused on the warmth of her palm, the slight roughness of her fingertips. He let his thumb rest lightly against the back of her hand, a subconscious stroke that felt surprisingly natural. Eleonora looked down at their joined hands, a faint pink dusting her cheeks. "Better," she murmured. They continued their walk, the silence between them less tense, more contemplative. They began to build their shared history, the fictional foundation of their romance. They debated the details of their fake engagement ring. Dario suggested a simple vintage band, while Eleonora jokingly demanded a rock the size of a pigeon egg. "We need to establish our couple aesthetic," she declared, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Are we the insufferably cute pair who finishes each other's sentences, or the smouldering, passionate duo who can't keep their hands off each other?" "Definitely not the latter," Dario shot back. "I don't think I could survive pretending to be a smouldering Casanova." "Good point. Let's stick to comfortably in love." Their rehearsal extended beyond physical affection. They had to learn the subtle language of intimacy, the inside jokes, the shared glances, the unspoken understanding that characterized couples who had been together for years. It was during one of these practice sessions that the lines between fiction and reality began to blur. They were at a crowded cafe, ostensibly running through potential interview questions Ingetraud might throw their way. Dario was mid-sentence, explaining their fictional stance on a destination wedding, when he glanced up and caught Eleonora watching him. Her expression was unguarded, a mixture of amusement and something deeper, something he couldn't quite decipher. The ambient noise of the cafe seemed to fade, leaving only the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. He found himself studying the curve of her jaw, the way her hair fell softly around her face, the faint smattering of freckles across her nose. He had looked at her 1,000 times before, but it felt as if he was truly seeing her for the first time. "Dario," she prompted, her brow furrowing slightly. "You drifted off." He blinked, pulling himself back to the present. "Sorry, I was just, thinking." "About a destination wedding?" "About how lucky I am," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Eleonora froze, her eyes widening. For a moment the air hung heavy between them, thick with unasked questions. Then she let out a shaky laugh, breaking the spell. "You're getting too good at this," she commended, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. That sounded almost genuine. "Yeah," Dario agreed, forcing a smile. "Just practicing." But as he looked away, staring into the dregs of his coffee, he knew it hadn't been practice. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just playing a role, he was feeling it. He was falling in love with his best friend. The revelation terrified him. This was supposed to be a joke, a temporary arrangement to solve a specific problem. If he confessed his true feelings, he risked destroying their friendship, the most important relationship in his life. He couldn't let that happen. He resolved to bury the feeling, to lock it away in the darkest corner of his mind. He would play the devoted fiancé, he would endure the family reunion, and then he would gracefully exit the role. He had to. The alternative was too devastating to contemplate. As the date of the reunion approached, their performances became increasingly polished. They moved in sync, their banter effortless, their affection convincing. To the outside world, they were a picture-perfect couple. But internally, Dario was unraveling. Every touch, every shared glance was a sweet torture. He was constantly acting, not just for Eleonora's family, but for Eleonora herself. He had to ensure that the line between fake and real remained sharply drawn, even as his own heart begged him to erase it. The night before they were scheduled to leave for the reunion, they decided to go out for a final celebration, a farewell to freedom, before stepping into the lion's den. They ended up at a loud, dimly lit club, the air thick with sweat and pulsing bass. They drank, they danced, they laughed until their sides ached. For a few hours, Dario managed to forget the impending charade, the agonizing weight of his secret. He was just Dario, and she was just Eleonora. They were at the bar waiting for another round of drinks. The noise was deafening, forcing them to lean in close to communicate. "Who's the lucky lady?" the bartender shouted, eyeing Eleonora as she leaned against me, her laughter bright and spilling over the rim of her margarita. I grinned, the tequila loosening my tongue, throwing an arm around her shoulders. "Her? She's my wife." The bartender laughed, wiping the counter. I expected Eleonora to shove me, to make a quick retort about my ridiculousness. Instead, she stilled. A soft, crimson blush crept up her neck, painting her cheeks. She leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered a secret meant only for me. "I wish that were true." The drive to Eleonora's hometown was fraught with a tense, unfamiliar silence. The air conditioning hummed, a monotonous drone that did little to drown out the echoes of her whispered confession the night before. "I wish that were true." Dario's mind raced, analysing the words from every conceivable angle. Had she been joking? Was it the tequila talking? Or was it a genuine admission, a crack in the armour she had worn so flawlessly? He glanced at her across the console. She was staring out the window, watching the blur of the passing landscape, her expression unreadable. She hadn't mentioned the incident since, and he had been too cowardly to bring it up. The uncertainty gnawed at him, a constant, irritating ache. "We're almost there," she finally said, her voice tight. "My mother's house is just past the old mill." Dario gripped the steering wheel harder. "Are you ready for this?" She turned to him, offering a fragile smile. "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember the plan. We are deeply, madly, and somewhat sickeningly in love." "Got it. Sickeningly in love." They pulled into the driveway of a sprawling, imposing Victorian house. The lawn was immaculately manicured and the porch was already crowded with relatives, a sea of unfamiliar faces that Dario felt wholly unprepared to navigate. Before they even reached the steps, the front door burst open and Ingertraud's stand descended upon them like a force of nature. She was a tall, elegant woman with sharp features and a gaze that could strip paint off a wall. "Eleonora!" she cried, enveloping her daughter in a suffocating embrace. "And you must be Dario. Finally!" She stepped back, assessing him with a critical eye. Dario felt like a piece of meat on a butcher's block. He straightened his spine, summoning every ounce of false confidence he possessed. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Stan," he said, extending a hand. "Eleonora has told me so much about you." Ingertraud ignored his hand, instead pulling him into a brisk hug. "Call me Ingertraud, darling. We're practically family now." She leaned back, her eyes zeroing in on Eleonora's left hand. "Now, let me see it." Eleonora, bless her heart, didn't miss a beat. She held up her hand, displaying the modest vintage ring they had spent hours agonizing over. Ingertraud frowned slightly. "It's quaint, very understated." "It's exactly what I wanted, Mother," Eleonora said firmly, linking her arm through Dario's. "Dario has excellent taste." "Well, come inside. Everyone is dying to meet the man who finally managed to pin you down." The rest of the evening was a blur of introductions, interrogations, and veiled insults masquerading as concern. Dario met aunts who pinched his cheeks, uncles who questioned his financial stability, and cousins who seemed genuinely surprised that Eleonora had managed to snag someone who wasn't a serial killer. And then there was Elsa MacDonald. Elsa was radiant, effortlessly juggling a glass of Chardonnay and a squirming toddler. She glided over to them, a picture of domestic perfection. "Eleonora, it's been ages," Elsa cooed, offering a sympathetic smile. "I was so surprised when I heard the news. We all thought you'd be married to your career forever." "Well, Elsa, life is full of surprises," Eleonora replied, her voice dangerously sweet. Elsa turned her attention to Dario. "And Dario, is it? What do you do?" "I'm an architect," he answered politely. "Oh, how lovely. My husband, Thyman, you know Thyman Mascheroni from high school, Elle. He's a corporate lawyer. It's very demanding, but it provides such a wonderful life for our little family." She patted the toddler's head affectionately. Dario felt Eleonora tense beside him. He needed to intervene to play the role of the devoted, protective fiancé. He slipped his arm around Eleonora's waist, pulling her close. "That's wonderful, Elsa. We're actually looking forward to building our own life together. Eleonora is so passionate about her work, and I admire her ambition. I wouldn't want her to change a thing." Eleonora looked up at him, her eyes shining with genuine gratitude. It was a fleeting moment, but it felt more real than anything else that evening. "How sweet," Elsa murmured, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. The performance continued. Dario and Eleonora played their parts flawlessly. They exchanged secret smiles, held hands under the table, and recounted their fabricated love story with practiced ease. They were the perfect, happy couple, a united front against the onslaught of Ingertraud's expectations. Later that night, exhausted and emotionally drained, they retreated to the guest bedroom they were forced to share. Ingertraud's insistence on propriety meant they had a single, undeniably romantic four-poster bed. Dario stood awkwardly near the door as Eleonora unpacked her bag. The silence stretched between them, heavy with exhaustion and unspoken tension. "You were amazing down there," Eleonora finally said, turning to face him. "You completely disarmed Elsa. I've never seen her look so flustered." "Just doing my job," Dario replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "I told you I was a good actor." The word actor hung in the air, a stark reminder of the charade they were playing. Eleonora's smile faltered slightly. "Right, an actor." She turned back to her bag. "Well, your performance was Oscar-worthy." "Elle," Dario started, taking a step toward her. He wanted to ask about the night before, about the whisper in the club. He needed to know if it was just a drunken slip or a reflection of something deeper. But before he could formulate the words, the bedroom door flew open. It was Lily Paris, Eleonora's younger, significantly more chaotic sister. She stood in the doorway, a mischievous grin plastered across her face, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Surprise!" she announced, breezing into the room. "I thought the newly engaged couple might need a little liquid courage after surviving Mother's interrogation." Dario swallowed hard, his confession dying on his lips. The moment was gone, buried under the weight of the lie they had created. He accepted a glass of champagne, his heart heavy. The charade was working perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. He was convincing everyone that he loved Eleonora, but the hardest person to convince was the one he was trying to hide it from. As they clinked glasses, Lily beamed at them. "To true love," she declared, "may it always be this easy." Dario met Eleonora's eyes over the rim of his glass. True love, if only it were that simple. The weekend at the Stan family estate felt less like a celebration and more like a carefully orchestrated psychological endurance test. By Saturday afternoon, the novelty of their engagement had worn off for everyone except Ingetraud, who seemed determined to extract every ounce of matrimonial planning out of the situation. Dario and Eleonora found themselves cornered in the solarium, trapped amidst violently blooming orchids and the suffocating scent of jasmine. "So, Dario," Ingetraud began, sipping her iced tea with the predatory grace of a hawk circling a field mouse. "Eleonora mentioned your firm handles residential projects. I assume you'll be designing your own home?" Dario shot a desperate glance at Eleonora, who was aggressively stirring sugar into her tea. "Actually, Ingetraud, we haven't quite settled on the logistics yet. Eleonora's gallery is in the city, and my firm—" "Nonsense," Ingetraud interrupted smoothly. "The city is no place to raise a family. Angel Nilsson, you remember him, Eleonora, the orthopedic surgeon? He and his lovely wife just bought a stunning estate in the suburbs. 6 bedrooms, perfect for children." Eleonora choked on her tea. "Mother, we are not talking about children." "Not yet, dear, but the clock is ticking. You're nearly 30. Ingetraud turned her piercing gaze back to Dario. "You must understand, Dario, Eleonora has a tendency to prioritize her little art projects over real life. It will be up to you to ground her." The casual dismissal of Eleonora's career, the career she had built from scratch, the exhibitions she poured her soul into, ignited a spark of genuine anger in Dario. This wasn't part of the script. "With all due respect, Ingetraud," Dario said, his voice surprisingly steady, "Eleonora's work isn't a little art project. She's brilliant at what she does. She curates exhibitions that matter. Her passion is one of the things I love most about her. I have no intention of grounding her. I intend to support her." The solarium fell utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of a bee trapped against the glass. Eleonora was staring at him, her eyes wide, an unreadable expression passing over her face. It wasn't the rehearsed gratitude they had practiced. It was something raw, something vulnerable. Ingetraud recovered quickly, offering a tight, patronizing smile. "How very modern of you. But practicality must eventually take precedence." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of forced politeness. Dario felt the strain of the performance taking its toll. It wasn't just the lying, it was the emotional whiplash of defending Eleonora, of acting like a devoted partner, when all he wanted was to be that partner in truth. They managed to escape before dinner, seeking refuge on a secluded bench near the edge of the property, overlooking a small, stagnant pond. Eleonora let out a long, ragged sigh, dropping her head into her hands. "I'm sorry, Dario. I'm so sorry I dragged you into this mess." "You didn't drag me," he reminded her gently, sitting beside her. "I volunteered." "You didn't know what you were volunteering for. My mother is a nightmare, and that comment about my career—" She looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you for defending me. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said, the truth slipping out before he could stop it. "I meant every word." She searched his face, her expression guarded. "You're a very good friend, Dario." Friend. The word felt like a physical blow. It was the boundary line they had drawn, the safe zone they were desperately clinging to, even as it crumbled beneath their feet. "Hell," he started, the courage he had lacked the night before suddenly surging within him. He needed to ask her. He needed to know what she had meant at the club. "Look!" she suddenly exclaimed, pointing toward the house. Dario followed her gaze. Striding across the lawn, looking entirely out of place in a tweed jacket and aggressively polished Oxfords, was Eustatio Cardoso. "Oh, God!" Eleonora groaned, sinking lower on the bench. "The raccoon guy! My mother actually invited him." Eustatio had spotted them. He offered a stiff wave and began marching toward their sanctuary. "Brace yourself," Dario murmured, shifting closer to Eleonora, instinctively wrapping an arm around her shoulders. The protective gesture felt less like acting and more like necessity. "Eleonora," Eustatio greeted, his voice nasal and formal. "And you must be the fiancé. Eustatio Cardoso, certified public accountant." He extended a hand. Dario shook it firmly. "Dario Gian, architect." Eustatio's gaze flicked to Dario's arm around Eleonora. "I was surprised to hear the news. Ingetraud had led me to believe Eleonora was currently unattached." "Well, she's not," Dario stated flatly, tightening his grip slightly. "So I see." Eustatio adjusted his glasses, looking uncomfortably like a taxidermy specimen himself. "I must say, Eleonora, I found your latest exhibition somewhat derivative. The Krauss pieces lack the structural integrity of true brutalism." Eleonora bristled, but before she could formulate a defense, Dario stepped in. "Derivative?" Dario countered, his tone dangerously polite. "That's a fascinating critique from an accountant. The structural integrity isn't meant to be literal. It's an exploration of emotional confinement. The jagged edges represent the conflict between internal vulnerability and external expectation." It was pure, unadulterated bullshit. Dario knew nothing about brutalist sculpture, but he delivered it with such conviction that Eustatio blinked in surprise. Eleonora stared at Dario, her mouth slightly open. "I see," Eustatio stammered, clearly out of his depth. "Well, I suppose art is subjective. If you'll excuse me, I need to speak with Ingetraud." He beat a hasty retreat, leaving Dario and Eleonora alone once more. Eleonora turned to him, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Internal vulnerability and external expectation?" Dario shrugged, trying to mask his own surprise at his outburst. "I panicked. I threw some architectural buzzwords in a blender and hoped for the best." She laughed, a genuine, uninhibited sound that made his heart ache. "It was brilliant. You completely shut him down." "Nobody insults my fake fiancé's exhibitions," he declared, offering a mock bow. For a moment, the tension that had plagued them all day vanished. They were just Dario and Eleonora again, two friends navigating a ridiculous situation. But as she looked at him, the laughter fading from her eyes, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thick, charged with the unspoken words that had been hovering between them since the club. "Dario," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. He leaned in, the distance between them shrinking. "Yeah?" "About the other night." His breath hitched. This was it. Before she could finish the sentence, a sharp voice cut through the stillness. "There you are!" Lily bounced down the path, waving a croquet mallet. "Mother demands your presence. We're playing a friendly game of family croquet, which means blood will be drawn." The moment shattered, fragile as glass. Eleonora pulled back, a flush creeping up her neck. "Coming, Lily," she called out, her voice shaky. Dario watched her walk away, the feeling of missed opportunity sitting heavy in his chest. They were playing a dangerous game, and the rules were changing faster than he could comprehend. The friendly croquet match was a battlefield. Ingetraud wielded her mallet like a weapon, ruthlessly targeting anyone who dared block her path to the stakes. Elsa MacDonald, pushing a bespoke stroller with one hand, somehow managed to play with terrifying precision. Dario and Eleonora, still reeling from their interrupted conversation, played terribly. They were distracted, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. The flawless performance they had delivered thus far was beginning to crack. "Dario, darling, you need to focus," Ingetraud chided, effortlessly sending his ball into the azalea bushes. "You can't navigate marriage if you can't navigate a simple lawn game." "He's just letting you win, Mother," Eleonora snapped, her patience finally fraying. The tension escalated throughout dinner. The dining room was suffocating, the air heavy with the smell of roast beef and the clinking of silver against china. The conversation inevitably turned back to the wedding. "So, have you set a date?" asked Uncle Horace, a jovial man with a booming voice. "We're thinking spring," Dario lied smoothly, cutting his meat with unnecessary force. "Spring," Elsa chimed in, leaning forward. "Spring is lovely. We had a spring wedding. Thyman insisted on an outdoor ceremony, even though the pollen count was atrocious. But it was so romantic." Eleonora gripped her wineglass tightly. "How wonderful for you, Elsa." It really was. Elsa took a sip of water. You know, Eleonora, I was speaking with Eustatio earlier. He mentioned Dario seemed quite defensive regarding your work. The table went quiet. Ingetraud looked up, her eyes glinting with malicious curiosity. Eustatio felt my critique was met with unnecessary hostility, Elsa continued, adopting a tone of faux concern. He just worries as an old friend that perhaps Dario is a bit overprotective. It can be stifling, don't you think? It was a calculated strike designed to undermine their relationship in front of the entire family. Dario felt a surge of fury, but before he could respond, Eleonora stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I think, Eleonora said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger, that my relationship is none of Eustacio's business. Or yours, Elsa. Eleonora, sit down, Ingetraud commanded softly, a dangerous edge to her voice. You're making a scene. No, Mother, I'm done. She threw her napkin onto the table. I'm done answering questions about my uterus, I'm done defending my career, and I'm definitely done listening to Elsa's passive-aggressive commentary. She turned and marched out of the dining room. Dario didn't hesitate. He dropped his fork and followed her, ignoring the shocked gasps and murmured comments from the family. He found her outside, pacing the length of the back patio, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The night air was cool, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the dining room. Elle, he started softly, approaching her cautiously. She spun around, tears streaming down her face. I can't do it, Dario. I can't play this game anymore. It's too hard. It's okay. We can leave. We'll pack our things and go right now. He reached out to comfort her, but she stepped back, out of his grasp. You don't understand, she choked out, running a hand through her hair. It's not just them. It's this. She gestured wildly between the two of them. This, he repeated, confusion warring with a rising sense of panic. Us! The fake engagement! The lies! She took a deep breath, visibly struggling to maintain control. I thought I could handle it. I thought it would be funny, a stupid joke to get my mother off my back. But it's not funny. Why not? His heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. Because, she whispered, her voice breaking, because when you touched me, when you defended me, when you looked at me like I was the only person in the room, I wanted it to be real. The world stopped spinning. The crickets fell silent. Everything narrowed down to the woman standing before him, her heart laid bare. I wish that were true. The whisper in the club finally made sense. It wasn't the tequila, it was the truth. Eleonora, he breathed, taking a step toward her. This time she didn't retreat. I'm terrified, Dario, she confessed, fresh tears spilling over. You're my best friend. If we cross this line and it ruins everything, I lose the most important person in my life. The fake engagement was safe because it wasn't real, but what I feel, it's too real. Dario closed the distance between them, framing her face with his hands. He wiped away a tear with his thumb, his touch infinitely gentle. It terrified me too, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. I realized it during our rehearsals. Every touch, every word. I wasn't acting, Elle. I was just finally allowing myself to show you how I felt. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, searching his face for any sign of deception. You mean it? I've never meant anything more. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't need to. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't the rehearsed, tentative kisses they had practiced. It was a collision of years of suppressed longing, of unspoken truths finally finding their voice. It was messy and desperate and fiercely real, fiercely. Eleonora's arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring him. The kiss deepened, sweeping away the lies, the anxiety, the suffocating presence of her family. There was only Dario and Eleonora, and the undeniable reality of what they were. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Eleonora rested her forehead against his. A watery laugh escaped her lips. So, she whispered, what happens now? Now, Dario said, a genuine, unburdened smile spreading across his face. We go back inside and tell them the truth. The truth? She pulled back slightly, her brow furrowed. That we lied about the engagement? No, he corrected gently. We tell them that the engagement might have started as a joke, But it's not a joke anymore. She stared at him, the realization dawning slowly. Are you saying... He took her left hand, his thumb tracing the cheap vintage ring they had bought as a prop. I'm saying, Dario declared, his voice steady and certain, that I'd like to replace this with something real, if you'll have me. Eleonora didn't answer with words. She pulled him in for another kiss, sealing the promise, turning the greatest lie they had ever told into the truest thing in their lives. They didn't go back into the dining room. The prospect of facing Ingetraud's wrath and Elsa's smug satisfaction held no appeal. Instead, they snuck up the back stairs, packed their bags in record time, and fled the Stan estate like thieves in the night. The drive back to the city was the polar opposite of the journey there. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced by a comfortable electric quiet. They held hands across the console, fingers intertwined, the physical connection a tangible reassurance of the massive shift in their reality. She's going to kill us, you know, Eleonora murmured, resting her head against the window, watching the streetlights bleed past. Your mother? Dario asked, glancing at her. Probably. I imagine she's currently drafting a strongly worded email outlining my inadequacies as a future son-in-law. Not just that. When she finds out we left without saying goodbye... Eleonora shuddered. It'll be World War III. Let her rage, Dario said simply, tightening his grip on her hand. We survived the raccoon enthusiast and the croquet match of death. We can survive Ingetraud. Together. The word together hung in the air, sweet and unfamiliar in this new context. When they finally arrived at Eleonora's apartment building, the exhaustion of the weekend hit them like a physical weight. They trudged up the stairs, dragging their bags, too tired to fully articulate the magnitude of what had just happened. Inside, the apartment was exactly as they had left it. The disorganized stacks of art books, the slightly wilted pothos plant on the windowsill. It was familiar, yet everything felt fundamentally different. Dario dropped his bag near the door and turned to face her. The fluorescent light from the hallway spilled across her tired features. I should probably head back to my place, he said, though his feet remained rooted to the spot. Eleonora looked up at him, a sudden panic flaring in her eyes. No! She reached out, grabbing the lapels of his jacket. Don't go, please! If you leave now, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and convince myself this was all a stress-induced hallucination. Dario smiled, his hands coming up to rest on her waist. I can assure you the last few hours were very real. Prove it, she challenged, pulling him closer. He kissed her, slowly, deliberately, savouring the taste of her, the feel of her against him. There was no audience to perform for, no pretense to maintain. It was just them. Stay, she whispered, against his lips. He stayed. The next morning brought the harsh, unfiltered light of reality. They woke up tangled in Eleonora's chaotic bedding, the events of the previous night rushing back with dizzying clarity. They spent the morning navigating the strange new territory of their relationship. The transition from best friends to lovers was incredibly natural, yet terrifyingly fragile. They knew each other's flaws, their irritations, their deepest fears. There was no honeymoon phase of discovery, only the terrifying vulnerability of being entirely known. So, Eleonora said, sitting cross-legged on the bed, nursing a mug of black coffee, how do we do this? Do we announce it? Dario, sitting opposite her, ran a hand through his messy hair. I think a press release might be overkill, but we should probably tell our friends, the ones who aren't currently planning our demise. Before they could strategize further, Eleonora's phone, sitting innocuously on the nightstand, began to vibrate. The screen flashed with a single ominous word. Mother. They stared at the device as if it were a live grenade. Do I answer it? Eleonora whispered, her eyes wide. You have to eventually, Dario reasoned. Better to rip the Band-Aid off. She took a deep breath, picked up the phone and swiped to accept the call. Hello, Mother. She put it on speaker so Dario could hear. Eleonora Brune. Ingetraud's voice was frigid, slicing through the static. I demand an explanation. Sneaking out like a thief in the night? Humiliating me in front of the entire family? Mother, Elsa was right, Ingetraud ploughed on, ignoring her daughter's attempt to speak. That man is a terrible influence on you. He is arrogant, dismissive, and clearly incapable of handling the social demands of our family. Dario grimaced but reached out to squeeze Eleonora's knee supportively. Mother, listen to me, Eleonora said, her voice strengthening. Dario is not a terrible influence, and he's not arrogant. He was defending me, because he cares about me. He's a fake, Eleonora, Ingertraud snapped. Lily told me everything. The blood drained from Eleonora's face. Lily? Yes. After you threw your little tantrum and vanished, Lily confessed. She told me the whole engagement was a farce, a pathetic attempt to avoid my nagging, as she put it. Ingertraud laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. I should have known. It was too good to be true. You settling down with a respectable man. Silence descended upon the bedroom. Lily, the chaotic younger sister, had dropped the bomb. Mother? Eleonora stammered, scrambling for a response. Don't try to lie your way out of this. Ingertraud cut her off. I am deeply disappointed, Eleonora, but frankly I'm relieved. I never liked him anyway. Now I expect you to call Eustachiu and apologise for your dreadful behaviour. He is still willing to look past this ridiculous charade. I am not calling Eustachiu, Eleonora stated flatly, a new resolve hardening her voice. And Lily was right. The engagement started as a joke. Dario watched her, his heart hammering in his chest. This was the moment of truth. It started as a joke, Eleonora continued, her gaze locked on Dario's. But it isn't anymore. What are you talking about? Ingertraud demanded. I mean, Dario and I are together, for real. And if you can't accept that, or him, then I suggest you stop calling me until you can. She didn't wait for a response. She hit the end call button and tossed the phone onto the bed. She exhaled a long, shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at Dario, a mixture of fear and defiance in her eyes. Well, she said, managing a weak smile. That went well. Dario moved across the bed, pulling her into his arms. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. You were amazing, he murmured. Brave. I was terrified, she admitted, relaxing into his embrace. But it felt good, telling the truth. They sat in silence for a long time, the morning sun streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The lie was exposed, the fallout had begun, but as Dario held the woman he loved, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The joke was over. The reality had just begun. The transition from a fake engagement to a real relationship was messier than Dario or Eleonora anticipated. Their foundation of friendship was solid, but the architecture of their romantic life was entirely new and frankly daunting. The first few weeks blended unbridled joy with sharp anxieties, untangling their constructed lies and explaining to mutual friends that the initial engagement was a hoax, but the subsequent relationship was real, required linguistic gymnastics. So you lied about being engaged, but you're not lying about dating now? Thyman Mascheroni asked at a crowded pub. Elsa is going to have a field day with this, Eleonora groaned. Please tell me you won't tell Elsa the whole truth. My lips are sealed, Thyman chuckled, but you guys are crazy. We're aware, Dario said, wrapping an arm around Eleonora. The gesture now felt as natural as breathing. The real challenge, however, was themselves. They were so accustomed to their unstructured friendship that relationship expectations sometimes felt heavy. Their first real fight, 2 weeks later, started over something painfully mundane. Dario returned from the store with oat milk instead of Eleonora's preferred almond milk. I specifically texted you, Eleonora said, holding the carton like a biohazard. The store was out, Dario apologized, shedding his coat. We always used to drink whatever was in the fridge. We used to be roommates who occasionally shared groceries, Dario. Not whatever we are now. It's about paying attention. The comment stung. I pay attention, Elle. I know you hate lavender and need absolute silence to write. I just bought the wrong milk. The kitchen crackled with sudden tension, their easy camaraderie replaced by the unfamiliar friction of a romantic dispute. Eleonora's shoulders slumped. I know you do. I'm sorry, I'm just projecting. The gallery board is reviewing the budget for the Kraus exhibition this afternoon. I'm stressed and I took it out on you. Dario tentatively touched her arm. You should have told me. We used to talk about this stuff all the time. But before it was just complaining to a friend. Now I feel like I have to be better. I don't want to burden you during our honeymoon phase. Dario laughed softly, hugging her. Elle, we skipped the honeymoon phase and went straight to the old married couple phase during our fake engagement. We don't have to change how we talk just because the label changed. You're still my best friend. He tipped her chin up and kissed her. But next time, if they don't have almond milk, just bring a black coffee. Noted. They navigated these small hurdles, learning that arguing didn't end the relationship, and that vulnerability was far more potent than flawless performances. Meanwhile, the silence from Ingertraud was deafening. "It's a strategic retreat," Lily advised during a phone call. "She's gathering intel." "Let her try," Eleonora replied wearily. Despite her brave front, Dario knew the estrangement bothered Eleonora. He couldn't fix this structural familial issue, but he could offer a steady foundation while she navigated the fallout of their truth. 3 months passed, and winter set in. Their relationship settled into a comfortable rhythm of shared quiet nights and chaotic work schedules. The true test of their new dynamic arrived with the opening night of Eleonora's highly anticipated exhibition, Fractured Concrete, The Legacy of Helge Kraus. It was the most significant curation of her career. The gallery was transformed, pristine white walls contrasting with Kraus's jagged, brutalist sculptures. The packed gala was an exercise in controlled chaos. Eleonora was in her element, moving through the crowd with practiced grace. Watching her with profound pride, Dario felt a tap on his shoulder. Thyman stood there, unaccompanied. "Impressive turnout," Thyman smirked. "I still half expect you two to announce this is performance art." "Sorry to disappoint," Dario laughed. "It's entirely real." Suddenly, the gallery's ambient chatter shifted into a tense silence. The crowd parted near the entrance. Wrapped in a formidable fur coat with an imperious expression, Ingertraud Stan walked through the double doors. Eleonora froze mid-conversation. Dario immediately navigated the crowd, reaching her side just as Ingertraud closed the distance. "Mother," Eleonora said steadily, "you didn't RSVP." "I don't RSVP to my daughter's events," Ingertraud declared, eyeing the sculptures with distaste. "Though, looking at this wreckage, perhaps I should have." She narrowed her eyes at Dario. "Still here, I see." "I'm not going anywhere, Ingertraud," he replied evenly, placing a subtle grounding hand on the small of Eleonora's back. Ingertraud turned back to her daughter. "Lily informed me this was a significant evening. I suppose congratulations are in order, even if the subject matter is incomprehensible." It was a backhanded peace offering wrapped in barbed wire. Eleonora didn't shrink back. She leaned slightly into Dario's touch, drawing strength. "Thank you, Mother. It's about finding beauty in the harsh realities and unpolished edges. It's not for everyone." She held her mother's gaze, the subtext clear. Ingertraud's jaw tightened. Looking between them, she realized there was no performance to exploit, only quiet, resolute solidarity. For the first time, Ingertraud looked uncertain. Her iron grip had slipped, and she couldn't simply demand it back. "Well," she finally said, "I suppose I should view the rest of the exhibit." As Ingertraud marched away, leaving bewildered attendees in her wake, Eleonora sagged slightly against Dario. "I think that was a victory," she whispered. "A decisive one," Dario agreed, hugging her. The evening was a massive critical and financial triumph, but as they walked home hand in hand through the snow-dusted streets, Dario knew the real victory was the quiet confidence in Eleonora's eyes. They had survived the familial warfare and built something undeniably real out of a ridiculous fiction. A year after the disastrous family reunion, Dario and Eleonora found themselves back where the lie began, on the worn leather sofa in Dario's apartment, surrounded by takeout boxes. "My mother called," Eleonora said, picking at a pizza box. "Oh, did she survive the latest country club scandal?" Their relationship with Ingertraud remained a frosty but manageable detente. "She did. She actually called to tell me Elsa and Thyman are getting a divorce." Dario winced. Ouch. Apparently, the perfect suburban life was suffocating. Mother sounded almost gleeful, like it validated her pessimism. Eleonora sighed thoughtfully. "A year ago, I was so terrified of ending up alone and disappointing her that I faked a relationship just to get her off my back." Dario closed his laptop, shifting closer. "And now?" "Now," she smiled softly, "I realized the only person I was lying to was myself. I was so scared of ruining our friendship that I ignored what was right in front of me." Dario kissed her palm. "We were both scared idiots." "Speak for yourself." "I was a master manipulator," she laughed, the sound warm in the quiet apartment. He pulled her into his lap, resting his forehead against hers. You know, we never did finish planning that fake wedding. Eleonora raised an eyebrow. Are we resurrecting the destination wedding debate? I was thinking something a little more permanent. Dario reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't a cheap prop. Eleonora stopped breathing as he opened it, revealing a simple, elegant diamond on a delicate gold band. No fake proposals this time, Dario said, his heart hammering against his ribs. Eleonora Brune, you are my best friend and the most brilliant, chaotic person I know. Pretending to be yours was the best thing I ever did because it finally led me to the truth. Silent tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't want to pretend anymore. I want it to be real every day. Will you marry me? A radiant smile broke across her face. The same smile from the night he suggested the absurd plan, but this time filled with pure, unadulterated joy. She didn't need to whisper a wish. It had already come true. Yes, she breathed, throwing her arms around his neck. Yes, you absolute idiot. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It was a promise forged in a ridiculous lie, tempered by truth, and finally, undeniably real. Thank you so much for listening to the joke that became a wish. Dario and Eleonora's journey from best friends to true loves proves that the biggest lies we tell are often to ourselves. And sometimes a reckless joke is exactly what we need to finally speak the hidden truth in our hearts. If this emotional romance captured your heart, if you laughed at their chaotic family drama, or swooned when the fake became real, please hit that like button. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever hidden your true feelings behind a joke? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this story with fellow romance lovers, and make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another dramatic, heart-wrenching tale. Until next time, keep believing in love.